Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac, where we explore Bitcoin through the lens of financial astrology and focus on generational cycles over short-term noise. As August closes and September begins, the astrology becomes more serious. The emotional intensity of eclipse season is still present, but the focus begins to shift towards structure, responsibility, and discernment. This period asks whether our beliefs can withstand pressure. It asks whether confidence is supported by evidence. It asks whether the systems we are building are strong enough to carry the future we imagine. For Bitcoin, these questions are especially relevant. The wider cycle continues to support decentralization, technological change, and a redistribution of financial trust. Yet the path forward is not without friction. Several transits during this period support maturity, stronger communication, and a more stable foundation. Others create confusion, frustration, and tension between expansion and limitation. The Pisces lunar eclipse opens the period by dissolving certainty. The Virgo new moon closes it by asking us to rebuild carefully. Between those 2 points, Bitcoin's natal chart reflects a meaningful adjustment in public perception, institutional pressure, and the relationship between belief and reality. Let's begin with the eclipse. On August 27th, we have a lunar eclipse at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. Lunar eclipses bring culmination, revelation, and emotional release. They often reveal what has been developing beneath the surface, especially where feelings, beliefs, or expectations have become difficult to sustain. Pisces governs intuition, imagination, surrender, collective emotion, and the unseen currents influencing our decisions. This eclipse may expose where hope has become disconnected from practical reality. A dream may need to evolve. A belief may need to be questioned. Something you once trusted may no longer feel as certain as it did before. Personally, this eclipse can feel tender. You may realize that an emotional chapter has already ended, even if the external circumstances have not fully changed. Pisces does not always offer immediate clarity. Sometimes it asks us to sit with uncertainty long enough for a deeper truth to emerge. In financial markets, Pisces can magnify collective emotion. Markets are shaped by data, but they are also shaped by belief. Investors buy what they think the future will become. They sell when that belief begins to weaken. Under a Pisces eclipse, hope and fear can become unusually persuasive. Rumors may carry more weight than facts. Speculative narratives can become emotionally charged. Price moves may feel more meaningful than they actually are. For Bitcoin, this eclipse may reveal where conviction has become idealized. Some investors may be confronted with unrealistic expectations around timing, adoption, or price. Others may reconnect with the deeper reasons they were drawn to Bitcoin in the first place. Bitcoin carries symbolic meaning far beyond its market value. It can represent financial independence. It can represent resistance to monetary instability. It can represent an alternative to institutional control. Those meanings matter, but the eclipse asks whether symbolism has replaced analysis. For traders, this can be a period of unstable price action and emotional reactions. Avoid assuming that the first dramatic move reveals the longer-term direction. For investors, this eclipse supports returning to first principles. What is Bitcoin designed to do? What gives the network value? Has the long-term thesis changed, or has the emotional environment simply become louder? Those questions may be more useful than any short-term prediction. On August 30th, transiting Saturn forms a trine to Bitcoin's natal Mercury. This is a constructive transit for communication, education, analysis, regulation, and long-term planning. Mercury in Bitcoin's chart describes the way the network is understood, discussed, documented, and communicated. Saturn brings discipline, maturity, and structure. When Saturn forms a trine, ideas can become more organized. Complex information can be translated into language that institutions, policymakers, and traditional investors are more willing to engage with. For Bitcoin, this may support a more serious public conversation. The narrative may begin moving away from novelty and speculation toward implementation. Regulators may approach the subject with greater technical understanding. Institutions may develop clearer internal policies. Companies may refine their digital asset strategies. Research may become more rigorous. This transit can support adoption because large institutions usually require structure before they participate. They need custody solutions, legal clarity, accounting standards, risk frameworks, and operational procedures. Saturn trine Mercury supports that kind of development. For long-term investors, this is a useful period for deeper study. It supports strengthening your understanding of custody, network security, monetary policy, and the infrastructure surrounding Bitcoin. For traders, this transit may help bring greater clarity to the market narrative after the emotional uncertainty of the eclipse. On August 31st, Jupiter in Leo forms a trine to retrograde Saturn in Aries. This is one of the most constructive collective aspects of the period. Jupiter expands, Saturn consolidates. When these planets work together, vision can become sustainable. Ideas can move beyond inspiration and begin taking form. Personally, this transit may help you see which goals are ready to become commitments. A plan that once felt too ambitious may begin looking achievable when approached with patience. Confidence becomes more grounded. Growth becomes more deliberate. Jupiter in Leo encourages courage and creative leadership. Saturn in Aries asks for responsibility around action. Together they ask whether your confidence can survive consistency. In financial markets, Jupiter trine Saturn often supports disciplined expansion, infrastructure development, and more stable forms of growth. For Bitcoin, this may coincide with further institutional maturation. Regulatory frameworks may become clearer. Custody services may improve. Investment products may become more established. Corporate participation may grow in a way that feels measured rather than speculative. Because Saturn is retrograde, some of this progress may involve revision. Institutions may revisit earlier decisions. Regulators may refine existing policy. Companies may strengthen systems before expanding further. The process may be slower than the market wants, but it can still be constructive. For long-term investors, this transit supports patience and disciplined conviction. For traders, it may favor higher timeframe structure over short-lived enthusiasm.
I'm briefly interrupting this episode to speak to you about one of my best-kept secrets, Shortlist. If you love luxury travel but hate the endless hours it takes to plan it, you need to know about Shortlist. Think of it as your premier membership for the uncompromising traveler. Shortlist gives you access to a beautifully curated world of exceptional hotels, villas, and experiences, with insider recommendations and reservations, and also exclusive member benefits designed to make every trip feel effortless. Less searching, better choices, extraordinary travel. If you're particular about where you stay and how you travel, Shortlist belongs on your radar. Click on the link in the description box to discover Shortlist. Okay, let's get back to the show.
On September 1st, Mars in Cancer squares retrograde Saturn in Aries. The tone becomes more frustrating. Mars wants movement. Saturn creates resistance. When these planets form a square, it can feel as though effort is meeting a wall. Personally, you may know what you want to do, but feel delayed by responsibility, timing, or circumstances outside your control. Cancer reacts emotionally. Aries reacts quickly. Together, they can make obstacles feel more personal than they are. The temptation may be to force movement simply to escape the frustration. Mars square Saturn often reminds us that timing matters as much as effort. In financial markets, this aspect can create stalled momentum. A breakout may struggle to follow through. A bearish move may also lose force. The result can be choppy price action, sudden reversals, or repeated failed attempts to establish direction. For Bitcoin, this may coincide with resistance from regulation, liquidity constraints, delayed institutional decisions, or technical levels that prove difficult to break. For active traders, this is a period to respect confirmation. Avoid forcing trades because price appears close to moving. When momentum and resistance are equally strong, patience becomes an edge. For investors, the transit may reveal where expectations have moved faster than implementation. That does not invalidate the larger story. It asks for a more realistic relationship with time. Also on September 1st, Transiting Jupiter forms a quincunx to Bitcoin's natal Mars. Mars in Bitcoin's chart describes momentum, action, competition, mining, technical energy, and the network's capacity to push through resistance. Jupiter expands whatever it touches. The quincunx creates imbalance and requires adjustment. This can produce growth without coordination. Confidence may encourage overreach. Participation may expand faster than infrastructure can adapt. A bullish narrative may attract more capital than the market can absorb smoothly. Institutional growth may also increase pressure on liquidity, regulation, custody, or mining. For Bitcoin, the challenge may be learning how to carry greater scale without compromising resilience. For traders, this aspect can increase the temptation to chase momentum. A move may look powerful while still lacking balance. For long-term investors, the deeper lesson is that growth creates new responsibilities. As Bitcoin becomes more significant, the systems surrounding it must evolve as well. On September 5th, transiting Saturn forms a sesquisquare to Bitcoin's natal Chiron. Chiron in Bitcoin's chart can describe the wound from which Bitcoin emerged. Bitcoin was born during the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. That crisis exposed the fragility of debt-based institutions, the risks of concentrated financial power, and the consequences of forcing the public to absorb private failure. Saturn brings those themes into contact with authority, regulation, responsibility, and limitation. This aspect may reopen old questions. Can Bitcoin remain accessible as regulation increases? Can it preserve decentralization as institutional involvement grows? Can it continue functioning as an alternative while becoming more integrated with the system it was created to challenge? The sesquisquare creates ongoing pressure rather than one dramatic event. It can reveal unresolved weaknesses. Custody concerns, mining policy, exchange concentration, or regulatory restrictions may become more visible. For investors, this transit encourages a mature examination of risk. Bitcoin itself may be resilient, but the ecosystem surrounding it still contains vulnerabilities. For traders, sentiment may become sensitive to regulatory criticism or old narratives returning to the market. Also on September 5th, Uranus forms a trine to Bitcoin's natal moon. This is a more supportive influence. The moon in Bitcoin's chart reflects public sentiment, community behavior, emotional response, and the market's instinctive relationship with the network. Uranus brings innovation, freedom, surprise, and rapid change. The trine allows those themes to unfold more easily. This transit may coincide with a constructive shift in public perception. People who previously viewed Bitcoin through an outdated narrative may begin seeing it differently. A technological development, policy change, corporate announcement, or shift in economic conditions could alter sentiment quickly. This can also support unexpected adoption. A company, government, institution, or online community may take a step that changes the tone of the conversation. For traders, sentiment may turn quickly under Uranian influence. Price can move before the wider market fully understands the catalyst. For investors, this transit reinforces the importance of watching behavioral change alongside price. Public perception often shifts before structural adoption becomes obvious.
I'm pausing this episode for just a moment to share one of our partners, the Sculpt Society. If you want workouts that actually fit into your life, you need to know about the Sculpt Society. Created by celebrity trainer Megan Roop, the Sculpt Society brings effective, feel-good workouts straight to you, wherever you are. Think sculpt, strength, dance cardio, and low-impact movement with classes for different fitness levels and schedules. Whether you have 10 minutes or you want a full workout, you can simply press play and move. It's convenient, energizing, and designed to make consistency feel so much easier. Click on the link in the description box to join the Sculpt Society and start your 7-day free trial today. Let's get back to the episode.
On the same day, transiting Neptune opposes Bitcoin's natal Jupiter. This is one of the most psychologically complex transits of the period. Jupiter in Bitcoin's chart reflects expansion, belief, global reach, opportunity, legal development, and the larger meaning attached to the network. Neptune dissolves boundaries. It can inspire vision, but it can also distort judgment. and opposition can make it difficult to separate faith from projection. For Bitcoin, this may expand the mythology surrounding the asset. Narratives about global adoption, monetary collapse, institutional transformation, or future price may become more emotionally persuasive. Some of those narratives may contain real insight. Others may be exaggerated. Neptune does not always confuse through outright falsehood. Sometimes it makes possibility feel inevitable. This aspect can encourage investors to treat Bitcoin as the solution to every monetary problem. It may also encourage the market to underestimate political, regulatory, social, or technical complexity. For traders, this can produce volatility driven by expectation rather than confirmation. Rumors may travel quickly, price targets may become unrealistic. For long-term investors, this transit asks for discernment. Belief is powerful. It becomes dangerous when it no longer permits questions. Healthy conviction remains open to evidence. On September 10th, we have a new moon at 18 degrees and 25 minutes of Virgo. After the emotional release of the Pisces eclipse and the pressure of early September, this new moon brings us back to what can be measured, improved, and implemented. Virgo asks practical questions. What is working? What needs refinement? Where has unnecessary complexity weakened the process? New moons begin cycles. In Virgo, the beginning may feel quiet. It may involve reorganizing a system, correcting an error, strengthening a routine, or creating a more disciplined approach. Virgo reminds us that lasting change is often built through repeated small improvements. Personally, this new moon supports clearer habits, better boundaries, practical planning, and more honest self-assessment. It invites us to remove noise so that energy can be used more effectively. Financially, Virgo supports research, due diligence, technical analysis, accounting, regulation, security, and careful execution. For Bitcoin, this new moon may shift the conversation toward the practical foundations of adoption: custody, network reliability, compliance, settlement systems, security, accounting standards. The emphasis becomes less philosophical and more operational. That is an important stage of maturation. Ideas become durable when they can function in ordinary life. For investors, this new moon is a useful time to review portfolio structure, risk exposure, custody practices, and long-term strategy. For traders, it supports clearer rules and disciplined execution. The market may still be carrying emotional residue from the eclipse and Neptune opposition, so evidence matters. Virgo reminds us that conviction does not need to be dramatic, it needs to be maintained. So to wrap up this episode, his period begins with a Pisces lunar eclipse and ends with a Virgo new moon. That movement tells the larger story. Pisces dissolves what has become unclear or idealized. Virgo rebuilds through precision. For Bitcoin, the astrology reflects an adjustment between vision and structure. Saturn trine Bitcoin's natal Mercury supports more mature communication, stronger frameworks, and clearer institutional understanding. Jupiter trine Saturn encourages sustainable expansion. Uranus trine Bitcoin's natal moon suggests that public perception and adoption may continue shifting in constructive but unexpected ways. The more challenging transits ask for caution. Mars square Saturn can produce frustration, stalled momentum, and choppy price action. Jupiter quincunx Bitcoin's natal Mars may encourage overextension. Saturn's contact with Bitcoin's natal Chiron may reopen concerns around regulation, control, and the network's relationship with traditional power. Neptune opposite Bitcoin's natal Jupiter creates the risk of idealization. For active traders, this period may contain conflicting signals. Supportive long-term astrology can exist alongside difficult short-term conditions. A constructive generational story does not prevent unstable price action. Respect confirmation. Be cautious with leverage around September 1st and September 5th. Avoid using conviction as a substitute for structure. For long-term investors, the deeper message is balance. The larger cycle remains aligned with decentralization, technological change, and the redistribution of trust. Yet Bitcoin's evolution still requires infrastructure, regulation, education, and responsible integration. The transition from speculative asset to global financial infrastructure cannot happen through belief alone. It requires systems capable of carrying that belief into reality. This remains part of the larger nodal story we have been following at the Bitcoin zodiac. The North Node in Aquarius continues directing attention toward networks, protocols, digital infrastructure, and systems that distribute power. The South Node in Leo continues exposing the weakness of personality-driven confidence. The Pisces Eclipse and Neptune opposition deepen that lesson. The future cannot be built on projection or charisma alone. Confidence must become verifiable. Trust must become transparent. Vision must become usable. That is where Bitcoin's deeper potential may continue to emerge. Astrology cannot guarantee market direction. It helps us understand when collective psychology is becoming more hopeful, more fearful, more receptive, or more vulnerable to excess. The purpose is not to predict every move. The purpose is to understand the conditions surrounding the move. As we move into September, the question becomes whether the structures being built can support the weight of what comes next. Thank you for joining me for this late August and early September forecast. Let me know in the comments which transit you are watching most closely, especially Neptune's opposition to Bitcoin's natal Jupiter and the Virgo new moon. And if you're new to the Bitcoin zodiac, welcome. Consider subscribing if you'd like to continue exploring the intersection of astrology, macroeconomics, and Bitcoin through the lens of long-term cycles. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, peace, love, and Bitcoin.